snow had not stopped falling in 6 months. Mei Chang stood at the base of the trail and stared upward into the white nothingness. Behind her, 2 senior disciples held lanterns that guttered and spat against the wind, their spiritual flames barely holding against the raw, bone-deep cold pouring down from the valley like something alive. She had dressed for court, not for climbing. Heavy teal robes dragged through the drifts, embroidered cranes disappearing beneath crusts of ice. She did not ask for help. She did not slow. The hut appeared exactly as it always had, a squat, graceless thing of timber and rough stone, crouched against the mountainside like a wound the forest had never managed to close. Her mother had built it 60 years ago with her own hands, refusing sect labor, refusing warmth talismans, refusing anything that might dilute the purity of the yin current pooled within this shadowed cleft, where sunlight touched the ground for perhaps 2 hours each day, at most. Mei had not visited in years. She had not needed to. Her mother was the greatest cultivator the clan had ever produced, save perhaps for, the thought stopped there. Mei cut it off with the efficiency of long practice. The door was frozen shut, not locked, not barred, simply sealed by 6 months of accumulated ice along its frame. One of the disciples stepped forward, a yang-infused palm at the ready, but Mei raised her hand, and he retreated. She placed her fingers against the wood. It was so cold it burned through her spiritual barrier. She felt the sting in the flesh of her palm, a small, deserved pain. She pushed. The ice cracked. The door swung inward on leather hinges that had gone stiff as iron. The interior was dark, and the cold inside was worse than outside, a paradox that should have been impossible. Cold pooled, yes, but it dissipated without a living source to anchor it. This cold had deepened. It sat in the room like water in a well, stratified, ancient, pressing against Mei's spiritual senses with such density that her breath caught. She saw the scroll first. It lay unrolled on the stone floor beside the sleeping pallet, its silk edges weighted with small river stones. Even from the doorway, she recognized her mother's brushwork, the savage, precise strokes of the Yinlu Codex. The manual her mother had forbidden anyone from reading, the manual that was supposed to have been burned upon her death. Then she saw the figure on the pallet. It was sitting upright in the full lotus position, hands resting on its knees, palms turned toward the ceiling. The gray robes, the same rough, unadorned servant's cloth her son had worn to the academy, hung loose on a frame that had narrowed and reshaped itself in ways that defied 6 months of time. The jaw had softened. The shoulders had drawn inward. The hair, unbound from its hemp string, fell past the shoulders in a straight, heavy curtain that caught no light. The figure's eyes were closed. Its breathing was so slow, so shallow, that for 3 full heartbeats Mei believed she was looking at a corpse. Then, the eyes opened. They were her brother's eyes. They had always been her brother's eyes. That same unyielding, cutting clarity that had once made war generals flinch across negotiation tables. But the face that held them now was not her brother's face, and it was no longer her son's face either. It was something new, something the Yinlu Codex had written into existence with 6 months of frozen, agonizing precision. The figure looked at Mei without recognition. No, that was wrong. It looked at her with perfect recognition and no reaction, the same way one might notice a familiar stone on a path walked 1,000 times. "Jin," Mei said. Her voice did not break. She would not permit it to break here, in front of the disciples behind her, in front of this cold and everything it implied. The figure said nothing for a long, long moment. When it finally spoke, the voice was lighter than she remembered, clear, uninflected, like a bell struck once in an empty temple. "That name is finished." Mei's hands, hidden in her sleeves, closed into fists so tight her jade rings bit crescents into her palms. In the span of that single sentence, she understood everything. The scroll on the floor, the impossible cold, the reshaped meridians her mother must have spent years preparing. Not training, not teaching, but preparing, like a farmer turning soil long before the seed is ever planted. She had sent her child here to suffer into greatness. Her mother had laid the groundwork for something far more radical, and then had the courtesy to die before it was complete, leaving a 15-year-old alone in a frozen hut with a forbidden manual and no other path forward. The guilt arrived not as a wave, but as a blade. Thin, precise, sliding between ribs she had thought were armored. She breathed through it. She had been breathing through worse for 15 years. "Can you walk?" she asked. The figure unfolded from the lotus position with a fluidity that made the motion seem almost rehearsed, though Mei knew with grim certainty it was not rehearsal but refinement, the body moving exactly as the cultivation demanded. No wasted energy, no tremor, no hesitation. Standing, the figure was shorter than Jin had been, or perhaps it only seemed so. The gray robes pooled around its feet. "I can walk," the voice said. "I can do considerably more than walk." The air in the hut dropped another degree. Frost crawled across the surface of the river stones in a slow, deliberate bloom, and one of the disciples behind Mei made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a prayer. Mei studied the face before her. She was already calculating. She was always calculating. It was what had kept the sect alive after her brother's death, after her mother's retreat, after every crisis that had tried to devour her bloodline whole. The public knew she had a son. The public also knew, because she had made certain they knew, that her mother had once borne a second grandchild in secret, a convenient lie, seeded years ago for reasons she could no longer remember, or perhaps for exactly this reason planted by her mother's foresight, like everything else. "You will need a name," Mei said. The figure tilted its head, a gesture so utterly devoid of warmth it might have been mechanical. "Ren," it said. "Grandmother chose it. It was written on the last page of the scroll." Of course it was. Even dead, the old woman was still 3 moves ahead. Mei turned and walked out of the hut without looking back, trusting that the creature her child had become would follow. The snow swallowed their footprints within minutes, and by morning there would be no evidence that anyone had climbed the trail at all.